Among the many contributions Mike Mentzer made to the science and philosophy of bodybuilding, one stands above the rest in its scope and significance. As he stated with characteristic clarity,
if I can honestly say I contributed one meaningful thing to exercise, it's what I just explained to you. That as you get stronger and bigger, you don't do more exercise, you do less.
At first glance, this may appear as little more than a recommendation for reduced training frequency. But to Mike, this was a discovery born not only of his own direct experience, but of careful reasoning, grounded in logical abstraction, and then verified through decades of application. It was a conceptual breakthrough, a recognition that a workout, once changed by an increase in strength, is no longer the same workout at all. As Mike said,
the following is a concretization. The word is concretization. Everything you just heard was abstract theoretical material. Now we're going to bring all that abstract stuff down to the concrete, the in reality. The following is the ultimate consequence and final practical application of the abstract theory just described.
Let us, then, follow Mike's own training path to concretize this truth. The early years, whole body, moderate frequency, and lighter weights. In the mid-1970s, Mike Mentzer trained 3 days per week using full-body workouts. In a handwritten letter to his friend Dave Masterakis from 1974, Mike detailed an intense routine involving 21 exercises per session. This included supersets, negative accentuated movements, and high-effort compound lifts such as squats, presses, and chin-ups, all performed with strict form and to a point of failure. The exercises were leg extension, leg press, squats, leg curls, dumbbell side laterals, press behind neck, chin behind neck, Nautilus chest machine, dumbbell incline press, regular palm facing you chins, pullover, pull down, shrugs, bench press on incline to neck, barbell curls, tricep press downs on lat machine, dips, wrist curls, curls again, dips, wrist curls. This routine, while intense, was manageable at the time because the absolute weight loads were comparatively moderate. As a developing bodybuilder still working his way up the ladder of strength, Mike's body could recover within 48 hours, at least for a while. But Mike was not content with stagnation. His goal was continual progress. Guided by the principle of progressive overload, he increased either the number of repetitions or the weight lifted whenever possible. He once told the bodybuilding writer Bradley J. Steiner, quote, "My workout before the Mr. America triumph in October, I squatted 505 pounds for 5 reps after having completed my leg extension negative accentuated leg press cycle. During the course of that week prior to the Mr. America, I did leg presses with 1,200 pounds for 5 reps, heavy sets of incline presses with 325 pounds for 3 reps, and comparable weights for other body areas. Last winter, I worked up to a 565-pound squat, a 300-pound press behind the neck, a 460-pound bench press, a 385-pound incline press, and a 600-pound deadlift. Obviously, heavy weights are the hallmark of my workouts." Close quote. Over time, however, this commitment to progress caused the demands of the same workout to skyrocket. Transformation by weight, from 20 tons to 40 tons. Mike's dedication to progressing his strength meant that his workouts evolved into something altogether different in magnitude and physiological demand. According to Dr. Paul DeVore, who monitored Mike's training and nutrition, quote, Mike Mentzer's usual exercise training schedule, that is, prior to the 8-month period before the October 1st, 1976 contest, consisted of 3 or 4 sessions per week, each lasting about 2 hours. He would lift a total of about 20 tons of weight during each 2-hour session. His goal during the 8 months prior to the 1976 contest was to double the intensity of each of his exercise sessions. With this stated goal in mind, he was eventually able to increase the intensity of his workouts to the point that he was lifting 40 tons per hour. Close quote. At first glance, it might seem that Mike simply increased his workload or shortened his workouts. But DeVore's phrasing refers specifically to lifting rate. That is, Mike began lifting 40 tons of weight per hour rather than 20 tons across 2 hours. His workouts still lasted approximately 2 hours, but the density of work he performed, measured in pounds per minute, had skyrocketed. In other words, he was now moving 80 tons, that is, 160,000 pounds, in the same time he once moved 20 tons, or 40,000 pounds. This was not just a harder version of the same workout, it was a different species of exercise. The numbers in this comparison table speak for themselves. They represent a geometric shift in stress and recovery. While the structure of the workout, time, number of exercises, remained the same, the systemic demand on Mike's body increased fourfold. This was no longer the same workout. Muscle fatigue increased, nervous system strain spiked, recovery demands multiplied, hormonal and immune response had to work overtime. This wasn't merely a heavier version of the same workout, it was a categorically different physiological event. Training with heavier weights transforms the same form of the workout into a different species of stress. The nervous system, connective tissues, endocrine response, and systemic recovery requirements all faced radically amplified demands. And Mike felt it deeply. The wall, when the workload becomes unrecoverable. Despite being in elite condition and using anabolic steroids to aid in recovery, Mike began to experience severe fatigue following these brutal whole-body sessions. In interviews, Mike described the consequences of pushing through this increasingly unsustainable stress load.
Well, even in '76, when I was training for the America, the full-body, high-intensity workout done 3 days a week was very demanding. I was going to school at the time, going to college, carrying full load, and also working in a doctor's office every day. And because my workouts came first in the morning, and they would leave me so exhausted that I found it difficult to go to class and then go to work. I was just dragging myself around. It was too demanding. And I wasn't enjoying it because it was so demanding and so brutal. I would find that my workout preceded by a period of anxiety, which I've heard from other bodybuilders who tried the same routine.
In response, Mike split his routine in half, moving to a 4-day split. This immediately cut his per-session systemic workload by 50%, allowing for greater systemic recovery. But this didn't mean he trained with less intensity. He continued to progress the weights, which eventually made even split routines too demanding. The turning point, when logic overrides tradition. The pivotal moment came in the early 1980s, when Mike and his brother Ray faced an undeniable truth. After a particularly intense Monday workout, they met the next day, only to find themselves utterly spent.
Ray and I met in the gym as usual, and of course still hell-bent on making maximum progress. I was thinking about the workouts and analyzing them, and analyzing their effects on my body day to day. And I said to my brother, Ray, how do you feel today? And he like me, was exhausted, still having not fully recovered from the Monday workouts. And I said, I reasoned that if we haven't, or I said, Ray, if we haven't even recovered from our workout yesterday, we're not going to be able to invest with our workout today with the intensity that is required to stimulate maximum muscle growth. And if we did, in fact, stimulate growth on Monday, which we probably did, we're not going to grow anyway because, again, recovery has to come first. Recovery and growth are both distinct physiological processes, both requiring time to fulfill or complete.
So, they took more rest and their progress exploded.
Our gains skyrocketed again, even for advanced bodybuilders. At one point there, I had gained 10 pounds of muscle in 3 weeks and lost 4 pounds of fat at the same time.
This confirmed what logic had already shown. Progress is limited not by training effort, but by recovery capacity. The solution wasn't more volume, more sets, or more frequency. It was intelligent timing and restraint.
And we found sometimes we even needed 2 days in between workouts. So we started doing a 4-day out of every 9 or 10-day split, not allowing tradition and convenience and compulsion at some point to supersede logic and reason.
This wasn't guesswork or instinct. It was reason applied to experience, conceptual integration, as Mike would call it. The final abstraction, the systemic effect and recovery individualization. One of Mike's most important realizations was that recovery is not just about the muscle being trained, it's about the entire system. As he said,
one of the chief sources of confusion on the issue of frequency is due to bodybuilders not realizing that exercise, in addition to having a localized effect on the muscle you're working, also has a systemic effect. One must rest long enough between workouts to allow for localized muscle recovery, like the legs or the arms, which again takes place actually rather quickly. But also you must allow enough time between workouts to allow for systemic recovery, which takes considerably longer.
And this systemic effect becomes more pronounced as strength increases. Greater loads generate greater systemic fatigue. As such, the frequency of workouts must be scaled in relation to the magnitude of training stress.
In fact, a good friend of mine, one of the guys who writes for my website, a very brilliant fellow named Dave Stapleton, who some of you may know, said one of the most intelligent things in this regard I ever heard. He said, Mike, we should not be prescribing rigid formulas for frequency. Each client should base his training frequency from his own progress chart. Let's say one workout you go up phenomenally, 55 pounds on the deadlift. Obviously, there was a much greater stress on the body. Instead of waiting 7 days, maybe wait 10 days.
Thus, every lifter must customize training frequency based on actual progress and recovery, not tradition or habit. As Mike concluded,
it is always a mistake to train 2 days in a row, because 2 days in a row or 24 hours between workouts is not sufficient to allow for either full recovery or growth production.
Most important of all was Mike's recognition that frequency must not remain static. Every increase in strength represented a new level of stress, and unless frequency was adjusted downward, it would eventually lead to stagnation or regression. Unlike most other bodybuilding theorists, including many high-intensity proponents, Mike refused to freeze the trainee in one fixed routine or template.
Do you see where it stands to reason, dear listeners, that as the weights grow progressively greater, then the stresses also grow progressively greater too? Does that make sense? If you don't do something to compensate for the ever-growing stress, the stresses will reach a critical point such that they constitute overtraining. The first symptom, of course, will be a slowdown in progress. And if you continue with the same exact volume and frequency protocol, there will ultimately be a complete cessation of progress known as a sticking point. I, like everyone else up until recently, used to believe that you had to reach a sticking point. It was inevitable. Until I realized what I just told you, that if you're lifting progressively heavier weights, then the stresses are growing greater. You've got to compensate for them, or eventually the stresses reach a critical point and they constitute overtraining. This can be prevented by inserting extra rest days and taking layoffs. You should never have to reach a sticking point.
Every other bodybuilding theorist, high intensity or otherwise, has the trainee stay on the same volume and frequency protocol virtually forever. Once the fundamental principles are understood, the issue of progressively decreasing the volume, and especially the frequency, becomes the most pressing issue. Conclusion: the workout evolves, so must you. To Mike Mentzer, the science of bodybuilding was not static. A workout that was once manageable at a lower strength level becomes, through progression, something new, heavier, more intense, and more systemically taxing. Thus, the same workout in form becomes a different workout in essence. And this recognition formed the basis of his most meaningful contribution.
If I can honestly say I contributed one meaningful thing to exercise, it's what I just explained to you. That as you get stronger and bigger, you don't do more exercise, you do less, because the stresses are growing greater. In other words, a beginner is too damn weak to overtrain. But as you grow bigger and stronger and you're handling 500-pound squats, you can overtrain very easily. So you don't train more as you grow bigger and stronger, you train less, and you'll keep growing.
That's not merely a tip, it's a principle. It's a truth that reshapes how we must think about progress, fatigue, and recovery. And it remains one of the most insightful, logical, and liberating ideas in the entire field of exercise science.